So I would like to give you a short or a bit of time to just do a roundtable, introduce yourself, give us a quick personal background on yourself, the topic of the multi-country replication or replications that you have worked on, or even just a brief research questions or question, and then what personal role you had in the study. And if you know it from the top of your head, it would also be interesting to know how many people were participating as collaborators, how many countries you had included. But then, Gilad, do you want to continue maybe?
Sure, thank you. Very happy to learn about JRPN, and I was not familiar with this before, and I think it's very important for me to know about this because in our project, we really aim to work with early career researchers. The entire prospect of our project is to mass mobilize as much as possible, beginning from students as early as second year undergraduate, all the way up to early career researchers through MPhil, PhD, postdoc, and my kind of level, early stage of assistant professor. So it all started, I'm currently an assistant professor at the University of Hong Kong. My journey with open science started at Maastricht University in the Netherlands, where I did my postdoc. And I think in 2016-17, it became very clear that things are happening in science. The first mass replication projects came out, and findings were disappointing. So the question for me as an early career researcher in my postdoc, having gone for a PhD, was what should I do with this knowledge? So before doing anything and continuing all the projects that I did before, I decided to pause everything and concentrate on trying to make sense of what's happening. Of all the domains that I was faced with, I was a social psychologist, so this is kind of like my general domain, but I really thought that kind of prospect theory or judgment and decision making seemed to be the most solid of the things that I had a chance to work with. So I decided I'm going to start from the domain of judgment decision making. I'm going to start doing as many pre-registered replications and pre-registered meta-analysis as I can in order to map out what works and what doesn't work. So I did a proof of concept with a few master's students at Maastricht University. And that worked out really well. I learned a lot about what is open science, what are replications, how to do pre-registrations. But after doing this for 2 years and embarking on my journey as a tenure track, I understood that if I'm just going to be me and 2-3 students a year, we'll never map out anything. So we need to really scale up, mass collaborate around the world with as many students as possible. So coming here to University of Hong Kong, I changed the entire syllabus of the courses that I'm assigned to. And I started doing projects with my students from second year to fourth year undergraduate, where they do hands-on real replication work within the course. So within one course semester, we take a classic judgment and decision-making phenomenon. It could be about anything, but we start as simple as possible, things that I think that a second year undergraduate that maybe had an exposure to t-test or ANOVA can handle, and that I can easily run on Amazon Mechanical Turk or Prolific, collect data. So within every semester, we do 20 of those. And then they do everything. I guide them together with teaching assistants. And finally, they do pre-registrations. I open everything for peer review on Twitter. I run the data collection. I give them the data sets. There's a whole process by which we do this. But after the first semester, it became clear that you can really do amazing projects with undergraduates. They are able to do real scientific projects. And now that we've summarized 3 years, we've concluded 100 of these replications and extensions of classics in judgment and decision making. So in terms of numbers, we're talking about 300 taught course students, plus about 30 guided thesis students. So we're talking about 330 students under my guidance and the teaching assistants. Now the question is, where does this become a cross-cultural, country collaboration. And in order to bring this to the community, these are great projects done very well by the students, but I wanted to ensure that these meet the highest standards of the field and are able to be published. So this is why I decided to open everything up. So I invite early career researchers, just like yourself, to come in and take the lead. You become the first author, followed by our students, the teaching assistants, and me at the end, in order to verify everything that we've done, add your own analysis, do the introduction and discussion, and finally submit this to the journal and bring this to publication. Last year, we've done about 15 of those, so 15 publications. This year, hopefully even more than that. So altogether, we're talking about students and early career researchers working together collaboratively in order to bring replications and extensions of classics in judgment decision-making to journals on a very large scale. Through that, last thing I'm going to say about this before moving on is we've built a lot of resources. So everything that we do is collaborative. Everything is on Google Docs. We have very extensive guides on how to conduct a replication, how to do extensions, how to do a power analysis, effect size calculations, and everything is open for collaboration as well. So if you go in, first of all, you can use this as much as you want, take this, adopt this, run this within your own classes or universities, but you can also pitch in, edit everything, add in your name, and then you become a collaborator when we submit these resources to be publications. So everything we do is collaborative, everything is shared, and we welcome anybody to join us in this kind of collaboration. In terms of numbers, we have about 50 early career researchers from around 20 countries, but we're very happy to have a lot from Europe and North America and here in Hong Kong, but we're especially interested in kind of branching out to places like Central, South America, Africa, and other places around the world that are less represented within our team. So looking forward to hearing from others and for you to join us if you'd like to.
That is really impressive. Did you say 100 replications? Did I get this right?
Yeah, 100 wow. Replications. Yeah.
So what I really would like to ask is, so which were the criteria that you used to determine which study you wanted to replicate? And then also, did you use a conceptual or direct replication? And also, so did you include any extensions to the study? Did you change anything in the model? And yeah, as many of you have been involved in multiple studies, feel free to choose from your projects. But Gilad, do you want to start and share your insights from one or two of your studies, maybe?
Sure. So I think mine is perhaps a little bit different because it's really not these mass collaborations in terms of data collection. It's more a mass collaboration in terms of who is involved in writing these things. I conduct most of my data collection with two major populations, Amazon Mechanical Turk Americans or prolific British. Plus we do participant pool samples, undergraduates here at the University of Hong Kong. So these are 3 samples. By and large, it seems like, at least with judgment decision-making, almost everything that we ran in multiple samples have replicated very well, to the extent that even the confidence intervals of the effect seem to be very similar to one another. So at least in our samples, it seemed to have a very consistent. In terms of which ones we choose, I still choose things based on my own preferences according to a certain criteria. Because we mass mobilize students as early as second year undergraduate, I want to make sure that it's feasible and doable. So one of the first criteria is as simple as possible. Classic effect in judgment and decision making, hopefully something that's impactful, that I think would be of use to me in my own research and to the academic community. So it's not like I had any doubts or something seemed suspicious. Quite the contrary, it's more like a tribute to these classics, a bit like with prospect theory. So it's something that's been very impactful has affected me in my own research, and I've seen it has an impact on the literature. And I just want to revisit this in order to first, reassess, see, it's been a few years since prospect theory and the classics in the 70s. So does it apply to today? To what extent can we get a more accurate, perhaps, effect size based on larger samples and these kinds of things? And I think an important point that you raised is that we don't only do direct replications of the classics. So direct replications means reproducing all the materials that perhaps have been lost, trying the best that we can to adhere to what it is that they've done. But on top of that, add some meaningful extensions of 3 different kinds of extensions that would add additional insights. First, insights on, let's say that this phenomenon works and everything is as expected. What else do we want to know about this? But also preparing for the option that perhaps things don't work as expected. What could be a possible reason for that? So extensions could be, we focus mainly on things like adding a dependent variable. So after the replication is completed, you go to the next stage and then you add another dependent variable. Another classic option that we do is adding a condition that is a neutral condition or a control condition that wasn't there in the original. Sometimes we try and not do too many of those, but adding an individual difference predictor before the actual replications to see what would predict kind of changes in these kinds of things. But you need to do this in a very specific way. Each one of these 3 extensions are very easy to explain to students in the classroom and give them some examples, and they do a really remarkable job at coming up with some very, very insightful things. So things that I know can be done by students as simple as possible, based on classics in the judgment decision-making literature, hopefully as impactful as possible in terms of number of citations or impact on the literature, that I can run online with Amazon Mechanical Turk or Prolific, and are fairly easy to add extensions on so that we'll have something meaningful to add to the literature.
Thank you. That's really interesting. So you're taking a very pragmatic approach to, also taking into account what can you actually do and what, yeah. Okay, Gilad, do you want to continue?
Sure. Yeah, so the model for us is a bit different because it starts from my own courses. So I teach 3 courses. It covers judgment decision-making, advanced social psychology, and fundamentals of social psychology. Different years, different courses. And I am not, judgment decision-making is an elective that I'm the only instructor for. So I'm the only one giving this, but it is an elective. So you choose this course. In the other 2 courses, I am one instructor of one session, and they have other choices. So I think an important thing over here is to ensure that students, when they come into these kinds of courses and become collaborators and co-authors for the very long term, that they know what is expected. And I have to say, to come into a university like University of Hong Kong that does things quite traditionally, and let's say an instructor with a PowerPoint goes, gives students the truth. Hear me, I'm the great professor, follow my lead. To my model, which is more based on what I did in Maastricht University with the problem-based learning, which is you have a problem, I will guide you, assist you, help you, but this is a journey that will go on together, and I don't have solutions for you. We'll figure this out together. So at the beginning, I got a lot of, how to say, pushback, criticism, skepticism. It's like, what is going on here? We don't understand the system. What is going on? So I think from the first semester when I ran this, and students were confused, the teaching assistant were confused, the department was confused, I learned that the most important thing in these kinds of collaborations and courses is setting expectations. So in the first 2 weeks of the course, we have the ad draw period, where I set expectations, very, very strictly, and say exactly what it means to collaborate, what is involved. I share all my evaluations very openly so people will know the positives and the negatives. And I give people the chance to drop out and move to other instructors. In addition, I do a quiz on the syllabus, which is like 30 pages long, in order to make sure that everybody understands what this course involves. And a lot of it is exploration, uncertainty. Not everything is guaranteed. We don't know what's going to happen at the end, but for sure we'll learn a lot more by doing things hands-on. So I think people come in not really knowing anything about statistics and methods and having a lot of doubts about what it means. Do I have what it takes as a second-year undergraduate to do a research project? But at the end of the semester, they have APA-style submission-ready manuscript with all the data collection and all the analysis, having gone through a very rigorous process, because we work, generally the gist of it is that we have two groups of two students who work independently on one target. During the whole process, they peer review one another, so they experience the academic process of giving peer review, providing and receiving. They get assistance from the teaching assistants, from myself. I open everything up on Twitter, so people come in. Sometimes the original authors come in and comment on their Google Docs and give them feedback, which is nice. In the upcoming semester, we're going to do the peer community and register reports with the scheduled reports, where official journal reviewers are going to come in a certain period during, after they submit the pre-registrations, in order to give them feedback, journal publication feedback. So we're doing everything in order to give them the sense that it's not based on outcomes, whether they're right or wrong, but it's based on comprehensiveness and transparency and how much they share and how much they're able to learn from the feedback that they receive. So all this process has a lot of uncertainty and all sorts of things that need to learn, but setting expectations in advance for this collaboration is very, very important. And once we agree on this, they, of course, are co-authors till this gets, until publication. This is like the first stage with the students. Afterwards, how do I recruit the collaborators as early career researchers? At the beginning, I didn't even think about this option. I just thought, it will be in my file drawer, which is counter to the whole prospect of things. But once I was, I think, 2018, 2019 in SIPS, Society for Improvement of Psychological Science, and in some open science workshop, I think it was in Padua in Italy, and I met some early career researchers. Then I realized like a lot of eager early career researchers want to take part, but they don't have any opportunities because everything is so high risk. So getting involved in this kind of thing, finding collaborators, is very, very complicated. And there I was sitting on, what was it, 40 back then, completed manuscripts in my file drawer. And then I asked people, so would you like to take lead on this and help us to bring this to publication? And they seemed very enthusiastic about this. So then I thought, okay, so let's just set the terms. Once again, setting expectations. So we have a very elaborate Google Doc where I explain exactly what it means to join us. And then on Twitter and in workshops that I was giving around the world, I started from Europe, but then I ventured out to other places in Asia, in Europe, and in North and South America. I just explained what it is that we do. I gave some examples, and then I asked who wants to join. And so far, I have not refused anybody. So anybody who showed interest and wanted to join, basically you say which of the replications you would want to help write up. Right now we have between 40 and 50 of those that are available for you. So you tell me what's interesting for you. I share all the Dropbox with everything that the students did, all the pre-registrations, the OSF, and all that. And then you can decide whether it's, you want to take the commitment or not. Sometimes we have collaborations between, two early career researchers that love working with one another. So one is more methods oriented and one is more write-up oriented, theory or the literature, so they can come together. Sometimes we have a model where the early career researcher has a mentor, so he's funded PhD or funded postdoc. That's also a possibility that both the mentor and the early career researcher join together, but we give the first co-authorship, the lead co-authorships to the students and the early career researchers. So we just, once they see all the terms, all the setting expectations, they've gone through all the materials, that's when we embark on this journey together. In addition, we have a very active Slack channel. So now all the early career researchers are helping one another. We have a lot of experience, so we've done quite a few of those. So we share everything with one another. It became kind of a small community, a movement of sorts. So anybody who's interested can just go read our Google Doc, see what the expectations are, tell us which one of the projects is interesting, and then we can pick it up from there.
Thank you. And it really seems like this collaborative spirit and people, choosing to take part in these sort of collaborations is seems to be key for all of the successful replications in terms of the project was successful, not necessarily the result, obviously. But that is great. I have before I move to Yanis, I have a question that maybe is moving away a little bit, but I would just be really interested because you say you give people the opportunity if they're not interested in that part or in such collaborations to also change their courses. So I'm wondering, do you think that sort of approach actually brings people who at the beginning might have not so much been interested in research to practically experience it? Does it bring them, or do you think this brings more people to research than it would with the normal approach or like the conservative older approach?
Yeah, I think students who did not even consider research as something that they would like to do, I'm not even talking academia, but also in the industry, data analytics or whatnot, behavioral insights teams and all that. I think after the semester is done, a lot of them come and they even write this in the evaluations, is that they have a completely different understanding of what it means to do research. I think also we tend to think that students don't know what's going on because we don't inform them of the so-called replication reproducibility crisis. So they're not familiar. They're familiar. They go online, they research these things, they hear. And then if we don't talk to them about this, if we don't involve them in this, they become very cynical and skeptical about everything that we tell them. So I think through the lens of involving them and being very straightforward about this is what's happening, we need your help, come and join us with this, they have renewed positive view of what it means to do research. So research is really self-correcting. There is a prospect of us contributing, even if we're not only senior researchers from Princeton, Stanford, and Ivy League. So even if you're an undergraduate from a university like University of Hong Kong with very little understanding of things, you can pick up these skills and you can have a meaningful contribution to the general research academic community that has impact on people's lives. I think especially during COVID times, you see the importance of open science and being transparent and doing things collaboratively. So I think a lot of them have renewed faith in science, in the scientific process. So if one of the greatest benefits of having a course like this is really changing mindsets. And I think a lot of them, I've had the 2 MPhil students that graduating this year and wanted to join me, started from sitting in my courses and saying, this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to do. How can we do more of this? And I think all the research that's been done by the early career researchers. So they come in not really understanding. So what is open science? So how do we do these complicated things like pre-registrations? What does it mean to share everything openly? So by the end of the collaboration, they have a completely new understanding, hands-on experience in how to do this well. And I think it's contribution to future generation of these researchers as they make progress. One of the nice things about this, which was an unexpected side effect, is that we publish these. So if you join us, you also have publications. And this is really important to have open science early career researcher competitive enough in this very difficult job market. So not only are you doing best practices, but also there's something here to also help you survive this very difficult circumstance of what's happening right now in academia. So that's kind of like the very broad goal of how we try to do things.
Yeah, I really like this approach, and I think it also very much overlaps with how JRP is approaching things to really look at this as a community and working together with these hands-on approaches, and then really to provide the opportunity in a positive thinking community. So I would just like to open the floor to further to the discussion on involving contributors from non-weird and underrepresented countries.
Okay, so I'll just comment on the Hong Kong angle. Unfortunately, Hong Kong is very weird, capital letter weird. You know, first of all, in the university, everything is conducted in English. They're considered in the literature to be native English speakers, given the former British colony history. Things are easy in Hong Kong. That said, we have a lot of links to mainland China. So we have increasingly more and more researchers that conduct research in mainland China, and there are possibilities, opportunities of extending that. And I know for a fact that there's a very large WeChat group, like a WhatsApp group, and it's very active with open science. I think with the same person who is a PSA coordinator in mainland China. So he's doing an amazing job just promoting these kinds of things. So if you're not sure whether you can collaborate in mainland China or not, you can if you get in touch with that group. And I think you'll find a lot of enthusiastic collaborators. In terms of how to reach other cultures, I've not done a good job at this. I think it's because it's just like a one-man operation. Basically, it's like it all revolves around me being able to reach out and recruit these kinds of things. But I've done the best that I can. And before COVID hit, COVID caught me at the beginning of a tour in South America and Brazil, where I was supposed to go through Brazil, Chile, Peru, and all this in order to talk to people in person. And I think it makes a big difference if you actually go over there and show that, you know, sit down with them, explain everything to them. Not that Brazil is, you know, very far behind. It has its own kind of sort of weird attributes. However, there's, you know, from there you can extend further. So I'll just give an example. Once we have 100 replications and extensions with everything open, all the call checks on the OSF and all that, then anybody, including people in Brazil, South America, Africa, and all that, can just take this as is. They don't even have to involve us and just translate the call checks material, even use the same pre-registration materials as us. You know, take as much as you want, take all of that, and focus on just training your students to, could be just a basic translation to, in Brazilian case, to Portuguese, but going through the process of open science and running replications. And this is exactly what's happening right now in Brazil. They're taking some of our replications in judgment decision-making, translating this and going through the whole process. Once they have some of that experience from this semester, hopefully we can scale up. I don't think this would have happened if I would not physically go there and explain things and show them just how simple it is for them to do this. So I really think some of the outreach is to go there, but COVID kind of made things a lot more difficult. I try and do this by giving workshops online on all sorts of topics, and then through the workshops explain what's possible and what's not. But it's difficult to reach them, especially during these times, especially if we require things that are more kind of complicated, elaborated in lab. So that's going to take a while until the world gets a grip and gets back to normal. If anybody has any other thoughts of how to do this, I'm very interested. But we have not done a very good job of this. Aside from let's say Brazil and a few places in Asia, I've not been able to reach these collaborators, and we are looking for more of that. But I just want to say, you don't need to be our collaborator in order to do these. You can take everything that we've done and use this in any way. You can run this as is or adjust this in any and I hope that what we do will have impact with us or without us, just by the fact of us doing open science and sharing everything, putting it out there.
So how did you choose the statistical approach? And then also a very tricky question, if you chose different statistics, how did you decide if a study replicated or not?
Yeah, complicated topic. It's hard to cover this in a few minutes, but I will say that we focus on direct replication. So the main task for the students, the people who conduct the replication, is to follow step by step what the original did. A lot of feedback that we get from reviewers is, why didn't you do this? Because in the last 40 years, we've discovered that. I always respond in the same way, in that replicators are not meant to fix problems in the original. First, we want to know whether the original really replicates or not. Then we can add exploratory analysis. We can do some more advanced stuff. But first of all, we want to know whether these things hold. If we run the exact same thing once again, does it replicate or not? Another pushback that we usually get is that we started off by using the original effect size as an estimate for the power analysis. And then reviewers are like, but we know from 2015 science paper that the effect size for those replicators is about half. How do you know? Have you done this for judgment and decision making? So actually, from our experience in judgment decision making, sometimes we get the same effect size. Sometimes we get much stronger effect size. On average, we get about the same effect size for the replications. So the assumption that you can generalize from this science paper or from this many labs to a different domain, I think we need a lot of humility when we come and we look at these things. Since then, I've found ways to power above and beyond. So we sometimes use the Simonson small telescopes, 2.5 times the sample size. Sometimes one time I was able to get the teaching development grant, not from research, but from teaching, to get some money. And then I just power them as much as I could. And then we show again and again to reviewers in the process that actually using the original estimates or a very recent meta-analysis with adjustments to publication bias is a good enough proxy for that. So we have a few ways to overcome both issues with the methods and issues with the power analysis. And the gist of it is we stick to the original and we add whatever is possible. So if we have money and we can power this beyond, then we try to follow Simonson and all the others in order to power more. If we can add additional analysis, then we do that. But the good thing working with students is that if you have a recipe, you just follow that recipe. You do whatever you can based on that recipe. Once the students have completed everything based on the replications, and then we involve early career researchers that take the lead. Some of them love Bayesian analysis, so they, sometimes we want to quantify support for the null hypothesis. So they implement that. Some of them do equivalence testing. Some of them do some very elaborate. Always nice, as long as you, of course, explain that this is exploratory on top of what we pre-registered. But all this is just like nice bonuses, nice to have. The methods are most of the time explicit in the replications. We do the best that we can in order to follow those and reproduce and do as a comprehensive job as possible in order to expose these methods, because sometimes they're very brief in the original. So basically just showing that everything that they've done in the original works as expected. Is it okay if I add a quick note?
Yes, please.
Just very quickly?
Yeah.
I think it's, for me at least, it's important to say that if you're an early career researcher and you're thinking, oh my God, this is so complicated, I'll never have a contribution, I'll never be able to finish a project, I'll never be able to publish this, I want to say, the PSA and all these models with mass collaborations, multi-country, are amazing. They've done amazing contributions to the field, and all these nature human behavior and AMPPS and perspectives. These are amazing accomplishments. However, much of the work that needs to be done is on a much lower level, singular replications, and this is where you can have a much more meaningful contribution with a much lower risk and a much more smaller environment that will eventually get to a publication. It wouldn't be nature human behavior and AMPPS, but it will get to the journals. Sometimes these mass collaborations kind of put all of us in the shadow, but there is a lot of room for you to contribute. I think the main contribution in this science reform comes from early career researchers and from students, and there's another possibility of doing different kinds of applications where you can take the lead, be involved, do a project from beginning to end within a very short period of time, and that would lead to an impactful publication that would help you in your career, being an open science researcher that helps promote the field and promote the science reform. So if you want to know more about like the other model, then I'll be very happy to talk to you about that and share some links, and we can pursue that more.